I'll just say it out loud with my whole chest. I love learning about useless, meaningless internet drama. It's one of those things where I spend an embarrassing amount of time reading every little niche tiff that a community has, going to every single facet of the internet, learning about what kind of controversy or what drama is happening over there. If I spent that same amount of time that I do reading about internet drama and instead spent that time learning useful skills, I would have been able to master like 5 different skills right now, like some really cool special things like juggling and clogging. But instead, I just learn about nonsense. It's my main vice, and it's more addicting than heroin, and I recognize that it's a pathetic hobby. It'd be less embarrassing if I just made fursuits in my spare time than read about internet drama. But regardless, the reason I'm talking about it today is because I recently watched Wavy Web Surf's new video on YouTubers that are in prison, and I was confident that I would know everyone that he was about to speak on, and I did know all of them except one. And that surprised me because the one I didn't know is really a fucked up situation that I feel most people probably weren't aware of. Because when I look up this person's name, there's only one channel that's ever really talked about them at length, and that was Philip DeFranco. Now, Philip DeFranco talks about something Pay Money Wubby talked about, which was the really weird fetish of breastfeeding videos on YouTube, where it clearly wasn't educational and they weren't breastfeeding their kids for the sake of like getting them nutrients, like the actual biological function of breastfeeding. They were filming this because it was fetish content to some really sick weirdos that were watching it. So he was focusing on the entire depraved community and only briefly mentioned the person we're about to talk about, Lee Felton. Lee Felton was once a piano teacher, but after her husband left her and her child, she then got desperate for money and started posting breastfeeding videos on YouTube that were clearly meant to be sexual. For those that don't know, YouTube has always had an exception to their nudity policy if the content is educational. And they used to have that for artistic expression as well, but that started getting abused. A lot of people recognized a loophole there where you could claim anything was artistic and then just have full nudity on YouTube. I remember a couple of classic bangers, such as the girl who opened a can of SpaghettiOs with her pussy and then like dumped the SpaghettiOs on the floor and called it modern art, or the absolute timeless masterpiece of the older woman who dressed in a morph suit but then cut the pussy out, so she just have her vagina on full display, and then she had a man pick her up and carry her around while she peed everywhere in a circle. So that was hype. And eventually YouTube recognized that this was getting abused, so they don't really have that exception for artistic nudity anymore, at least not like they used to, but it does still exist for educational content. So things like how to administer a breast exam, or like how to do a Brazilian wax. If you look up that kind of shit, you can find full nudity because it's people trying to educate, even though a lot of people will recognize there's bad actors here, once again just using that educational loophole for porn on the platform. But the point is, and there's also naked yoga on YouTube, fully nude yoga that they claim is educational on poses and how the human body reacts to the poses. I'm getting sidetracked. There is a loophole for nudity on the platform as long as it's educational. And Lee Felton, it took advantage of that. She started making this breastfeeding content where she just had her titties out and she'd have her child being breastfed. And she made a lot of content like that and then started to recognize that her audience wasn't women trying to learn how to breastfeed. It was creepy, absolute fucking worms that were watching her to jerk off. It was sexual. So she started to lean into it.
Lee reportedly made breastfeeding videos where she rubbed herself and her child down in oil and shoved her breasts in the baby's face. Lee would give her videos titles akin to something you might find on an adult website. Titles such as Slip and Slide and Mommy's a Whore. Jesus fucking Christ.
Jesus fucking Christ is right. So Lee Felton turned to the ultimate dark side. She was not only producing this pornographic material, but she was selling unlisted links to the videos to these absolute fucking degenerates. And you can clearly recognize the big problem here. She was producing pornography that involved an actual child.
According to reports, a Wisconsin man was apparently busted purchasing Lee's content by his wife, and after discovering the repulsive videos, the wife reportedly felt into authorities.
And hopefully the wife also left the husband, because that is an absolute unhinged weirdo, and hopefully he was also charged with purchasing child pornography, because that's what this shit is. You have porn that involves a child. It's child pornography. And initially, she was facing an absolute grocery list here of charges: 34 counts of capital sexual battery, plus other charges of promoting a sexual performance by a child, possession of child pornography, and lewd and lascivious molestation, crimes that could have carried a life sentence. But she was only found guilty on one of the charges, which carried a 10-year sentence. Now, let's go over a little bit more of what Wavy Web Surf points out, which is how she defended these actions in the case.
During her trial, she would describe her videos as a, quote, silly little playful thing, and that she doesn't believe it's criminal.
A silly little playful thing, huh? Fucking menace. What a fiend. Oh, so goofy to produce porn that involves a child that is in your porn. Man, how wacky. Oh, wow, goodness gracious, Lee. This was her entire stance during the case, that it wasn't serious, and that she was also going through mental health struggles, which led to her doing this. She said that she had finally got attention that she had been craving for so long, so she leaned into it even further, but it was never serious, and it wasn't criminal or bad or anything. It was just a playful thing that she was also charging money for. That was clearly sexually charged, because a lot of the titles, like Mommy's a Whore and Good Little Boy, were being sold as the unlisted videos. But for some reason, she still tried to play it off like, oh, it's just so silly, that's all. You guys are overreacting. That was her absolute lobotomized take during all of it. And her lawyers were just as smooth-brained. They tried to argue that everything she did was protected by free speech. I'm not even fucking kidding. I'm not making that up. They made this a free speech argument, that she should be able, and it's not criminal, for her to breastfeed her child in these sexually charged fetish videos because it's a free speech expression.
Lee Felton's defense attempted to argue that her breastfeeding videos fell under free speech protection, but nobody was buying this defense. A Tallahassee sheriff's lieutenant puts it best. Quote, "The video was clearly not done for the purpose of education or artistic display. Based on the content and the fact that it's being sold by Felton, it is clear this video is for sexual purposes."
Fucking obviously. This is not a free speech issue. I love free speech. I hate censorship. You know what this isn't? Free speech. And it's not censorship. You can't just use this as a catch-all term or defense like, what do you mean I can't dismember my neighbor when I'm upset? What about free speech, huh? Do we not live in a free country? I can't go over there and just fucking decapitate him? Come on. Are you serious? I don't want to live in a society where Lee Felton can't produce sexual breastfeeding videos for people to enjoy. Oh my goodness. What happened to free speech? It's fucking lunacy. It's absolute craziness that that's what they tried. But what's even more insulting is that it must have worked to some degree, because her charges, all 34 of them, she was found not guilty on, except for one. But that charge carried a 10-year sentence, so she is still spending a significant time behind bars, but not as long as she should, I would argue. She of course lost custody of her child, but I really don't understand why they reduced the sentence so much. There was overwhelming evidence against her, with tons of videos as well as tons of receipts of the videos being sold to like 40 or 50 different clients allegedly. Like that, I still feel like 10 years was a pretty light sentence for all of this, with all of that considered, but whatever. Anyway, just wanted to talk about this because I found this to be a pretty interesting story that I'd never heard of before, so huge hats off to Wavy Web Surf for finding this and talking about it, because this was a really interesting and really fucked up one. That's about it. So yeah.